This is a picture of a potato farm. On the left, you can see the potatoes are nice and bright green plants with the flowers. Everything looks healthy. And to the right, you can see that everything is dried out. Well, in 1845, one of the push factors that occurred in Ireland was known as the potato famine. And what happened was all the farms dried up, and so they didn't have enough food. And it really pushed a lot of the people to decide to immigrate to America because the situation in Ireland was so terrible. For once, Sean and Fiona Murphy were grateful for the crowds of people on their street in New York City. It was a freezing cold day in 1858, and all those bodies helped block the powerful wind blowing in from the Hudson River. Fiona told Sean, "Let's go to Uncle Brendan's." And a minute later they entered their uncle's little restaurant named Murphy's, after their family. The cold followed them in, so they quickly shut the door behind themselves. A familiar voice called out, "Well now, look who the cat dragged in." It was Uncle Brendan. "'Twasn't a cat," Sean laughed. "It was Fiona. I'm hungry, Uncle Brendan." "You're a 15-year-old boy," his uncle answered. "You're always hungry. Sit down and I'll get each of you a plate. But Sean, don't eat so much that you leave nothing left for my paying customers." Just then, Aunt Kathleen came out from the kitchen and walked over. Quietly, she asked, "How's your ma?" Fiona grew serious. "Not so good, Auntie. She says she should be used to this cold after living in a drafty one-room shack back in Ireland, but this New York winter is doing something to her. And you know Pa, he never says he's worried, but when he was home last month, I could see it in his eyes. I've been wishing he could be home more." Kathleen replied, "He's lucky to have a job. Working to lay railroad tracks out west may take him away often, but his pay is putting food in your mouth and paying for whatever heat he can get in our home." Fiona's family, including her aunt and uncle, had been sharing a tiny apartment ever since they had emigrated from Ireland to settle in the United States. Uncle Brendan's restaurant, Murphy's, was doing well now, but he and his brother Peter, Sean, and Fiona's father were still paying back the money they owed for buying the restaurant. Any money they earned helped the whole family. By now, plates of food had appeared in front of Sean and Fiona. Sean breathed in the familiar smells of the food from his home country, Ireland. "Ah, bacon joint and potatoes," he told Aunt Kathleen. "It reminds me of Ireland every time I smell your cooking." "It should," she answered, "since I cook the same foods for you there. Once we have more to eat here. There was never enough food to eat after the potato blight ruined our main food source in Ireland. Even your Pa, the strongest man I know, was getting weak from hunger. It's a blessing to come to a country where there's food to eat. The land of opportunity, indeed. Back in Dublin, Ireland, we worked just as hard and had a lot less." "Aye," said Uncle Brendan. "We would never have been able to own a restaurant back in Ireland, and even if we could have, no one had enough money to be a paying customer. We had so many hardships back home. We complained when all we had to eat in Ireland was potatoes, but we suffered tremendously when the potatoes were no longer there. Our family had to pay a lot of money to immigrate to America, and even with all the difficulty we were going through, it has all been worth it. We have a good place to live in a neighborhood of Irish folks like us. Sure, some people have been hostile toward us, but there's more food on our table than we ever had back home in Ireland, and crowded as it may be, I prefer New York City to farming the rocky Irish soil. Still, I do miss a lot of the folks we left behind when we emigrated from Ireland." As he was saying this, the door opened and a voice shouted out, "Well, I'm glad to hear that, Brendan, for we've no plans to go back." Uncle Brendan's face burst into a huge grin. "Michael Connolly!" he exclaimed. Turning, he saw his old neighbors from Ireland walking through the door. They were new immigrants to the United States now. After a happy reunion, Brendan said, "Sit down all and we'll bring you a good warm meal." Later, after the Connolly family was full of Kathleen's hearty food, Brendan asked Michael, "Have you a place to stay? And what are you doing about work?" "We're staying with my brother for now," his old neighbor replied. "As for work," he shrugged. "I'd hire you myself," Brendan said. but I couldn't afford to pay you. But there's a fellow here from the old country who needs wagon drivers to deliver ice in the summer and coal for fires in the winter. No man alive knows more about horses than you do, Michael. I'll take you to meet him. It's hard work, but what isn't? At least you'll be near your new home, not like my brother Peter out west, laying railroad track with a pick and shovel. At this, his niece Fiona said, "But not for long, Uncle. That's what I was starting to tell you. We got a letter. Pa says his boss thinks so highly of his work that he's bringing him back to New York City to work in an office." Her brother Sean added, "Pa will be home at the end of the month. He says that it's a lucky thing we can read and write, or we would not have been given this new opportunity. He says it will pay better than our building the railroad out west. What's even better is that now we will be close to home to care for Ma." You should have seen her face when I read her the letter. I think maybe she'll get better care now, with Pa around. Uncle Brendan nodded. "Aye, Sean, when your pa is around, your mother perks up like a flower that just got watered. And see how important it is that you and Fiona learn to read and write so well at an early age. One day, you'll have better job opportunities than any of us." Sean smiled. "Fiona and I are lucky now to live here in the land of opportunity, but we will never forget where we came from and what sacrifices our family made to get here." "Well," said Uncle Brendan, "it seems we all have a great deal to be grateful for in America. Kathleen and I are lucky enough to own a restaurant. The Connellys are newcomers here. My brother will be with us soon and working in a better job, and I believe your ma will get better children. All in all, I'd say that as hard as the changes sometimes are, coming to America was a good idea."